Janaan, you can start whenever you're ready.
As I begin this presentation, I need to tell you two things. I'm having a bit of a problem with my throat, but I think I'll make it through. And the other thing is the John August Swanson studio prepared the disc, and it's quite comprehensive, as you see in that booklet. Sidebars with additional information accompany some of the images. I suggest that you don't try to read them. Simply focus on the images. Many of the images are repeated actually every time that I mention them, so you'll become familiar with his work. Well, you're already familiar with it because it is all over this building. What I'd like you to do is simply relax and enjoy. That being said, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about one of my passions, great art. Great art, like great music, great literature, and great drama, add a dimension to our lives. It enhances our spirit, enlivens our imagination, stirs our heart, and awakens the more that often lies latent within us. Therefore, it's a joy and a privilege to introduce you to one of the great living artists of our century, John August Swanson. I'll tell you how I came to know John Swanson, tell you a bit about who he is, and describe why his art appeals to me. I know Swanson and possess a collection of his art because my deceased husband, Carl J. Pfeiffer, loved his works. I'm not sure when Carl discovered Mr. Swanson, nor am I sure that he ever met him, but I do know that whenever he saw one of his works, he bought it. His works grace practically the walls of every room of our home in Arlington, Virginia. The Story of Ruth hung in our dining room. The Classroom hung above Carl's desk. The River and the Nativity were in our living room. The Story of Joseph was in my office, and The Wedding Feast was in our bedroom. As I mentioned before, I'm not sure that Carl ever met Mr. Swanson, but on a number of occasions, I've had the privilege of spending time with him in his home in Los Angeles. His home, which is also his gallery, is unusually modest. His works are carefully hung on every inch of the wall space in each of the rooms. A grand piano graces the living room, which gives evidence of the fact that he's also a musician. He doesn't play the piano, but he does play the violin and viola. With either instrument, he generously plays in nursing homes, at weddings, anniversaries, funerals, and to other events to which he's invited. Art is a major and powerful part of the portrait of John August Swanson, but music is a critical element of whom he is. Music, particularly the opera, was loved by his family. Gradually, he too developed an appreciation for music. In his own words, he told me, quote, "It has always been my deep sense that I wanted to play music, that it was so important to be able to express myself in music," unquote. There's much more to know about the artist. I'll only give you a glimpse. And this glimpse comes from articles about him that appeared in the National Catholic Reporter, St. Anthony Messenger, Arts in Religious and Theological Studies, and in personal reflections that he's made about his works. The The first 30 years of Swanson's life were not predictive of what would follow. He was born to immigrant parents, a Mexican mother, and a Swedish father. His mother, a garment worker, came to the United States when she was 18. Swanson attributes his knack for storytelling to his mother's side of the family, as well as his love for the Mexican muralists and the bright colors of Latin American art. His father, a vegetable vendor, was mostly absent from the family. Swanson and his older sister were reared by their mom. In spite of his father's absence, he credits his interest in Swedish folk art, as well as his love for the circus, to his dad. Swanson attended college both at Loyola University and UCLA, but dropped out. He had various jobs over the years, including one in a paint factory. His early hardscrabble life and his affiliation with the Young Christian Workers in the 1960s brought him to a lifelong commitment to Catholic social teaching. Drifting and without direction until age 30, Swanson finally enrolled in an art class offered by Sister Corita Kent at Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles. Corita saved my life, Swanson says. She became a mentor and helped me find the door that had been closed in my life. She opened me to art and ideas. She made me feel important and helped me find healing. Swanson helped Sister Corita with some of her serigraphs and soon found himself intrigued with the silkscreen process. He credits her with helping him discover his own artistic path and voice. He says, quote, "It took me a long time to understand what I needed to do. I knew I wasn't good at communicating with words or through writing, but I found that I was good at communicating through art," unquote. Swanson is quick to say that he did not set out to produce religious art. Rather, he found out that when he gave everything he had to his art, the end result was art that contained the sacred. I'm going to repeat that admission. He found that when he gave everything he had to his art, the end result was art that contained the sacred. That statement, more than any of the thousands of words that I've read about him, describes who and how he is. He continues to give everything to his art, and the end result is visible in every one of his works. If this is the first time that you've seen his paintings, you'll understand as you spend time with them what is expressed in that statement. He works in many media and on a wide variety of subjects. He has a special interest in the clowns and in the circus, as well as in concerts, opera, and social celebrations of all kinds. He attributes his love for clowns to his admission that as a child, when he was good, his father took him to the circus. Two of his paintings of clowns are PAPAGENO and Jester. I'll reflect more on Jester later in the talk. Many of his works, perhaps most of them, are on biblical stories. But he's quick to point out that the biblical story is only a starting point. He has some hopes for viewers. He wants us to look for universal meanings in his works. As I've said earlier, Swanson does not consider himself a religious artist. His explanation: I feel that there is as much spirituality in secular themes as in the biblical pictures I've done. He suggests that if a picture strikes a chord, whether it's a picture of a clown, a musician, or Mary, it has made a spiritual impact, and that impact is different for everyone. He says further, I don't want the picture to say, this is Christian or this is Catholic. It's for all people. I especially want those who are disenchanted with religion to like it. I want to add a new insight and look to the Bible stories, insights that give them relevance for today. Swanson also focuses on everyday existence. Some of those works are the tree planting, Power to the People, the Classroom, and the poem Prayer by E.E. Cummings. When describing his artistic motivation, Swanson quotes Sister Wendy Beckett. True art, she writes, comes from so deep in the psyche that it almost forces itself out. The images come not from the artist, but through them. So it's not a question of faith or desire, but one of necessity. For Swanson, this necessity is fed by what he calls the hungry eye, which gathers and takes in all kinds of stimuli. He's received several well-deserved recognitions for his work. I'll mention only 3. For his visionary achievements as a graphic artist, he was awarded the Doctor of Humane Letters degree from California Lutheran University. His serograph, Francis and the Wolf, was awarded a President's Purchase Award by the Kellogg Art Gallery. In 2006, he was one of 33 recipients of the first annual Mother Teresa Award, acknowledging his spiritual, artistic, humanitarian, and philanthropic achievements. Swanson is among luminaries such as Pope John Paul II, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, President Jimmy Carter, and Sister Wendy Beckett. His art is represented in permanent collections of many museums throughout the world, including the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the Art Institute of Chicago, the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, and in London's Tate Gallery and the Victoria and Albert Museum. In September of 2012, I visited the Victoria and Albert Museum and spent time with his painting, The Orchestra. His painting, The Procession, is in the Vatican Museum's collection of modern art. It's one of the relatively few works by contemporary artists to be selected by the Vatican. He considers it the grand work of his life. If you're ever in Atlanta, Georgia, 55 of his paintings are in the Candler School of Theology at Emory University. Now to the second part of this presentation. I'll attempt as best I can to answer the question, what is it that I find appealing in John Swanson's art? Keep in mind a suggestion of Swanson's that I mentioned earlier, that if a picture strikes a chord, whether it's a picture of a clown, a musician, or Mary, it has made a spiritual impact, and that impact is different for everyone. I'm going to use 7 words to share with you the impact his words have had on me. The first is wonder. Pope John Paul II, in his letter to artists, says this quote, "Faced with the sacredness of life and of the human person, and before the marvels of the universe, wonder is the only appropriate attitude," unquote. I think it's fair to say that all of us experience wonder when we watch the sunset, see a baby take a first step, watch dolphins rise from the ocean floor, stand lovingly close to someone who's taking his or her last breath, or read a poem that gives substance to the way we're feeling. For example, after Carl died, I couldn't understand why I couldn't understand. Then I stumbled across this poem by Langston Hughes. I loved my friend. He went away from me. There's nothing more to say. The poem ends soft as it began. I loved my friend. I still didn't understand, but the poem gave substance to the wonder I was experiencing. Swanson's art does that. It gives substance to the marvelous that is present in stories, symphonies, circuses, tree plantings, labor movements, the whole of life experiencing, awakening us again and again to the truth that much of life is wondrous. When we grasp that, we have a solid grip on the virtue of hope. The second word is beauty. In all of us, there's a primal hunger for beauty. Most of the time, we're hardly aware, but we're always subconsciously and consciously on the lookout for beauty. I grew up on a farm. Part of the time was during the Depression. I can't say that we were poor, but we had little more than we needed. Yet quilts covered our beds, and they unknowingly satisfied some of my hunger. Religious paintings of Mary, the Last Supper, and the Sacred Heart, as well as crucifixes, hung on the walls of our home. My mother had a vegetable garden, but she also had a flower bed. And I remember vases of flowers in our dining and living room. I find the beauty in Swanson's paintings breathtaking. They sate my appetite, satisfy my hunger. They fill my life with hope, even in the darkest of times. One of those paintings hangs in my dining room. Its entry into the city. For me, the beauty in this painting contains a different kind of power and message than in others of Swanson's works. It shows people on a mission. The colors of the people's clothing, their rugs, their flags, their homes, even those of the officers are rich and splendid. The sky, deep orange with a touch of yellow, it's somewhat foreboding. The faces, hundreds of them, are all alike. A community, prayerfully intentional, utterly strong and beautiful. This is a march with everyone's focus on someone who is seemingly out of step with authority, someone who is seemingly a threat, in this instance, Jesus. Leaders rise up. Marches and protests happen all the time. The artist himself says best what is at the heart and soul of this work. Quote, "I was moved to paint this dramatic scene because it has been repeated in the lives of heroic, selfless leaders like Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Oscar Romero, Cesar Chavez, and countless others who have struggled for justice and peace. I also wanted to convey my personal feelings of being in marches for the cause of peace and justice for Central America, the Middle East, for economic and civil rights for our country, and as a witness for peace against arms buildup." End quote. This painting gives perfect and meaningful expression to the power that beauty has. It not only provides us with food for our spirits, but it can be instructive, uplifting, challenging, and moving. The third word is mystery. Whether we recognize or own it, another name for each of us might be mystery. Each of us is so unique that our imaginations have a hard time containing that truth. We deal with it by talking to ourselves. We find it at play when something that we've been trying to figure out becomes clear. We find it at prayer when we thank God for how we are, especially when we've done something that's genuinely noble or exquisitely creative. We can't put a box around mystery, nor do we have enough words in English or other languages to adequately describe it. The best thing we can do is say that we encounter it. I encounter it in Swanson's use of color, his yellows, blues, reds, greens, and purple transfuse and energize my spirit. They give me a glimmer of the divine. They fill me with joy. Mystery is in many of Swanson's paintings, and I find it particularly in his painting, Gesture. I have more questions about this painting than any other of Swanson's works. The jester is the dominant figure, but my eyes keep going downward to the two women, the two children, and the two men. Although they're dressed well, they're asleep on a floor. No chairs, no mattresses, no blankets, but most of all, no shoes. Even the feet of the children are bare. Without shoes, they're seemingly grounded. So the question, are they homeless? Are they related to the jester, a part of his immediate family? Is the ladder that the jester is standing on a bridge out of poverty? Is he someone on a mission to create a change in all of our lives? An image of a savior? An image of you or me called to serve every person who comes our way? Does the beautiful star-filled, moonlit sky symbolize a new heaven, a new earth, a new life? This leaves me with an awe-filled experience of mystery. More than any other of Swanson's painting, this one has me often talking to myself. It has changed dramatically my attention to those who have less than. Microphone. Thank you, John. Moving around too much, Irene.
It's all right. Get a clip back on here.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? The fourth word is story. Each of us is a storybook. Our life experiences make up the chapters. And in our life experiences is the story of God. When my husband Carl and I were writing religion textbooks, we carefully developed lessons that brought Bible stories and the children's life experiences together. Our goal was to help them connect the stories of their lives with the story of God. And we kept doing it lesson after lesson because we hoped that the children would grow in a sense that they and the world are filled with visible evidence of the invisible God. Gerard Manley Hopkins, the English Jesuit poet, exquisitely sums up this tradition of a graced universe. The world, he wrote, is charged with the grandeur of God, unquote. That is a major reason why I love Swanson's art. Many of his pictures are not only unique stories in themselves, they contain many stories. For example, Francis and the Wolf. The main picture of Francis with the tamed wolf lying peacefully at his feet. However, that's only part of the story. In the border of the painting, there are depictions of 18 other of Francis's life experiences. Another example is the washing of the feet. When I first looked at it, I was completely taken by the 14 large figures that dominate the painting. I totally missed the miniature scenes at the top of each of the 4 columns. Many of Swanson's paintings are powerful visual reminders that there's more to the biblical stories and to our own stories than is seen at first glance. There's always more to see. There's always more to know. The fifth word is celebration. When I gave this presentation at the opening of an exhibit of my collection at Sinsinawa Mound in Wisconsin, I'm sorry, Carl's and my goddaughter Angela came from Chicago, and our godson Miguel came from New York to be with me. I singled them out because I knew that they were keenly aware of the profound role celebrations played in our lives. We celebrated the good times like birthdays, graduations, holidays, and feast days, as well as the bad times. Like coming together around the table the evening after they learned that their parents were separating. Remembering with stories, poetry, and good food the life of their beloved grandfather who had died in Honduras. Coming together for a fondue dinner to celebrate the life of a beloved priest and pastor who had died of AIDS. And most memorable of all were the weekly dinners to celebrate everything that remained in Carl after he was stricken with Alzheimer's. Those meals were over and over again experiences of Eucharist, times of taking the bread of our lives, breaking it, and saying amen. When I look at Swanson's celebration, I remember again the joy, the healing, the love that wove our lives together as a family. Those celebrations helped us to remember that we belonged and that we could survive what was happening to us inside, outside, and beyond. We not only need celebrations for happiness, they provide us with a human and spiritual connection to each other and help us remember that this is not all there is. The sixth word is ordinary. There are many extraordinary moments and realities in our lives, but most of them are ordinary. We take them for granted. For example, one January morning I met my cousin Elaine Seaman for breakfast at the Village Inn, a restaurant in Dubuque. We do that often enough, so it was ordinary. But what surprised me as I was returning to my condo afterwards is how newly conscious and grateful I was for the sun. During winter, I often feel a deep hunger for the sun, and this winter was an unusual one. In spite of my hunger, I've taken it for granted. Not for the artist, John August Swanson, when you consider how often the sun shows up in his paintings. In E.E. Cummings' prayer, it's in 9 of the images. In the tree planting, it shows up 5 times. It shines 6 times in the story of Ruth. And it shines brightly in the skies of the river, a visit, and the presentation. It's in 4 of the images that border the painting of Francis and the wolf. And there are so many in the border of the Last Supper, I didn't even count them. Surprisingly, when you look at the middle of the painting Elijah, the sun is shining with unusual brightness. His paintings make me aware that the sun is not ordinary, but an extraordinary presence that brightens our lives, akin to God's presence. Another of Swanson's paintings in which his expression of the ordinary surprises me. Many images of the Annunciation show Mary kneeling in prayer, seemingly awaiting the announcement. In Swanson's painting, which he called The Visit, Mary is feeding the chickens. One more example. I live near the Mississippi River. You have the Grand here. A treasure of beauty, productive activity, and fun. When I dine at Tony Roma's, a local restaurant, I always ask for a booth by the window so I can, from time to time, glance at the beauty of the river. This seemingly ordinary presence in my life is practically the whole of one of Swanson's paintings. It's the visualization of John the Baptist baptizing Jesus at the River Jordan. But Mr. Swanson names it simply the river, placing in our mind's eye not only the biblical story, but the precious and saving gift of water. My 7th and final word is compassion. It's not surprising to me that compassion is at the heart of Swanson's work because he's deeply compassionate. I particularly like his painting, Psalm 23. It keeps me aware that compassion is always available to me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The story of Ruth is another of his paintings that deeply captures the spirit and action of compassion. The story is told above the images, part of which is, after her daughters-in-law have buried their husbands, they leave the land of Moab. Naomi urges them to return to their parents as she would return to the land of Judah. Ruth refuses to leave Naomi and tells her, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live." In another of his paintings, The Wedding Feast, we see Jesus literally saving the celebration after the wine runs out. He changes jugs of water into wine, and one of the stewards exclaims that the best wine was saved for last. And still another is Power to the People. It reflects what is often at the end of emails that come from the John August Swanson studio. It's the fourfold Franciscan blessing, quote, "May God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we really can make a difference in this world, so that we are able, with God's grace, to do what others claim cannot be done." I own one of John Swanson's Good Samaritan, but there's more than one, and there's more than one here. But I think the one I have is probably the greatest painting of compassion that I have ever seen. It's an exquisite three-panel depiction of someone who sees another in need. He stops and takes care. It matters not that a cultural difference exists between the one in need and the one in help, who helps. Every time I look at it, I'm visually reminded of the call that Jesus has given me to love my neighbor. And this conference is perfect for this. We're all called to love our neighbor, to love each other, to practice the virtue of compassion. It doesn't have to be all that challenging or hard. It can be as simple as what the columnist, Rebecca Christian, suggests in the opening of one of her columns that appeared in an issue of the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald. She writes, "As the 23rd year of writing this column unfolds, I want to remember the advice that novelist Henry James gave his nephew, quote, 'Three things are important in life. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. The third is to be kind.' I say amen to that." As I end my presentation, I strongly recommend that you spend time with Swanson's painting. Pause at each one and absorb its message, its story. Be surprised by what happens in your imagination, in your feelings. And above all, trust the unique impact that each one has on you. There's still time for questions if anyone has one, either for me or for John August Swanson, the artist who is here with us. Would you come up, John, please?
I should be embarrassed. It's a lot of honor comments, but maybe you have questions. But the one thing that isn't the way I started out wasn't that I wanted to be an artist. When I started out, that was the farthest thing. I just wanted to learn how to make signs and posters. And it was during the time of the civil rights movement, the war movement, and that's what everyone was doing. So I took the night class, and I was learning from everything that was going on. You know, there were all these posters being made. There was psychedelic posters. There was rock and roll posters. And I was very naive. I came from a little town, so I didn't know a lot. And then I took this night class with Karita. And so it wasn't that I said, oh, I'm going to be doing art. It was the last thing. And then I joined a group from this college where she taught. And it was a group that we did political theater. And we would go out in the streets and do political theater. And I just kept working. And then people would say, you better get a job, get out and go back to school. Your life is ruined. But it was okay. I never thought my life was going to be anything different. My dad was kind of lost in Skid Row. It was very difficult. And I thought, well, really, maybe that's what I'm called to do, is just be a street person and live as best I can to help other people and be there with God in Skid Row. And so I wasn't looking at fame or anything like that. And so it was just slow work. I just kept working and working. And then oftentimes, actually they don't show it, but it's the fishermen. Over the years I kept making paintings of the fishermen or printing. The silk screen was what I liked because that made the work more available to more people and less expensive. And so right away, someone at the beginning, before I did anything, they gave me an old silk screen, and I taught myself by mistakes and by going and asking questions. I would go to the store where they sold the supplies and kept asking them, what do I do now? I can't get everything aligned. And then they'd tell me. And actually I became not a pest, but I know when I'd walk in, they'd say, uh-oh, you take him this time. And so, and then times I would say, no, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get a job. I can't be trying to live like this. It's too unpredictable. And then I remember there was a place right by where I lived, and then I went down there and I took the test. It was a spelling test it was called a recycler, and they sold things people would call and said, I want to sell this vacuum cleaner. And that's what got me. I took the test and I couldn't spell vacuum cleaner. And so then I said, well, I'm going back to doing my work. And so each time I'd say, no, I can't do it. I'm afraid I'm a lousy artist. I think I've used all the thought I had. Then I'd go back and I'd do something, and then I'd start all over again. But it wasn't like, oh, here I'm real brave, I'm going to take on this job. No, I was always running away, and then it was like Jonah, hey, get back to work. So as nice as Janaan talks about me, it's not the way it was. It was always like... So the fact that I'm still here, I thank God, and also that you even care about the work to come and listen to about it. Oh, I have cards to give you too. One that you didn't talk about was the Pentecost.
No,
if you want,
I just newly got that one, John.
oh, yeah, but I have a new work that I did called Pentecost, and it's based on an older work. Oh, one of the things about working is not, and it's based on the great playwright, the African American playwright August Wilson. And there was, they had the play, and Janaan came to visit me when it was on. It was called the Joe Turner's Come and Gone, but then there were all these write-ups about it, and it's a brilliant play. I'd seen it before, but there was an interview by a man, or a man wrote about the play, and then he said when he had met August Wilson, he asked, how do you become a writer? And he said, it's write and rewrite, write and rewrite. And then I realized that's what I do in most of my work. I take an older work, like there's a fisherman, actually they have the wrong date on it. It's from 73. But then in 93, I did it again. But over the years, I kept painting it, and I kept wondering, why am I painting this image, the fisherman? Because it's about after the resurrection, they're on the fishing boat and they've all given up. They can't catch any fish, and they keep hearing, throw your nets one more time, throw your nets one more time, and then they catch all these fish. And so then I realized that image, it's like the unconscious, and maybe it's grace telling you, throw your nets one more time, even though you're a coward, you don't want to do it, you're lazy, get to work, throw your nets one more time, and then I do it, and then all of a sudden I get all these ideas and start working. But
And didn't someone ask you to do paintings at one point? No?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Oh, anyway, but the idea that August Wilson, the playwright, said, write and rewrite, and all my work has been taking old drawings, reworking them, old work, constantly going back and saying, I wonder what would happen if I went back and did that. So Janaan showed the slide, or she showed the procession that went to the Vatican in 1983. And then in 2006, I began printing it, and that's what we have here, the serigraph. And Jordan Clegg, raise your hand. He got it for when he graduated with his master's degree. His family bought it for him. I was so honored that he remembered, and he came to talk to me. But anyway, but then it was in 2006 I went back to printing. I thought I'll print it, and I thought this is the last work I'm going to do, so it's got to be the best work I've ever done. It took me 1 year of work, and I spent all the time just drawing each stencil in order to print it. It was very elaborate. And then I couldn't finish it. It was 12 months, and I couldn't finish it because I kept saying, well, it's the best work you're ever going to do. So I didn't know, when do you say it's finished? Finally, there was a friend of mine that was a Lutheran pastor, and he said, John, it's finished. Get finished with it. It looks great. Don't do any more. And then I started crying because it was very emotional. And then, but I had other commitments that I had to show it at the Catholic Cathedral. They had a show, an anniversary show, and I was part of the first artwork that they brought in, and so they wanted me to bring that in. So I stopped it, but it's just interesting that my life has been going back to old things, start looking at them again. What do I do today? How much, like maybe 5 years, 10 years, my life has changed. So then I go back and I see, what can I do that might be different? How would I re-envision it? How can I make it new? And so many of my works, I've gone back. And if you look at the procession, there's 54 little miniatures. And each of those miniatures I've made as either serigraph or other paintings, or they come back in different ways. And also the Ecclesiastes has lots of little drawings and little miniatures that became later bigger works. Sorry to take your show.
I think that's wonderful.
Oh, do you have any questions? Ask the questions. Ask me a question. Oh, the lady in the back.
In the other room, you have Psalm 82 serigraph, and then there's Psalm
85.
Or 85. And then there's another one. That's the painting.
Yeah, one on the right as you go is the painting that I did, but then based on that painting I did the serigraph. But as I say, when I go, the painting was done maybe 5 years earlier, or maybe 10 years, and then when I go back to printing it, it's a different media, and I start working at a certain part. At time, you depart from looking at the painting and you just start working with what you've got there, because it's a different media and you're a different person. You know, you become a different person. You look at things different, and the colors are different than when you're painting. But you're right. There's a serigraph, the painting and the serigraph.
So the one that's in the Vatican of the procession is the painting?
The painting, yeah. I started in 1980, and then I finished it 14 months later. And talk about artists making a living, like people say, well, somebody when I was at Canada, they said, now that you're wealthy and famous, do you think that you've compromised? Because I always said I wanted to live with the poor and be poor. And they said, do you think you've compromised your life? But I mean, I've got a lot of things, and I don't think I'm poor, but I don't know if it's like I'm lavish. But when I did that 14 months of painting, the director of the modern collection of religious art at the Vatican saw it. He was in San Francisco. I drove up to show it to him, and he said, "Yeah, we want it, but you have to find a sponsor. We don't buy art." I thought, oh my God. So I'm driving home from San Francisco, and I thought, gee, I'm excited and yet I'm sad. What do? I can't give it to them. And so then this one pastor, it was from, I can't remember the denomination. Disciples of Christ. He said, oh yeah, we're going to do a fundraiser and we'll ask 1,000 people to give you $10 or we'll raise money. It was a modest amount. 10,000 people to give $10. And they wanted to raise $10,000 for 14 months. And then the president of Loyola Marymount called and he said, we'll do a fundraiser for you and we'll ask, how many people would it take to get 100 people, $100? Is that 10,000? Come on, Dan Pearson. Anyway, forget it. It doesn't matter. So then I said, okay, I'll go with the bigger. Maybe it'll get done quicker, and also they'll be able to. And so they bought it, but we only raised $6,000. So $6,000 for 14 months isn't a lot of money. You're not making a lot of money, but it was okay because I realized that if somebody bought it and just put it in their house, that's not. I didn't feel like this kind of work, it needed to be where people could see it.
Yeah.
And then, then it happened, it went to the Vatican, and then it was very exciting, even though when I went to visit the Vatican, I went to see the director, and he said, yeah, come in, and there in his office, in this beautiful office, it was an ancient building, or not ancient, but it was like from the medieval times, and there was my procession. I said, but why is it out? Why is it in here? It should be outside where people can see it. He said, well, more important people are going to come into my office. I said, I know, but my friends from Los Angeles want to see it. He said, well, they can call me up and they can come and see it. Then I said, well, that's not good enough. And then his assistant took me on a tour of the collection, and then I said, tell me frankly, is this really out? Did he just bring it so I could see it? Or is it really here? And he said, no, it's not. It's always here. Well, I felt a little bit better. But in the last 6 or 7 years, the new director put it right in the galleries. And so when you go to see the Sistine Chapel, there's all these little alcoves or little galleries, and it's there. And there was this man from Fuller Seminary, Sarah. Johnson? What's his name? Steve? No, anyway, he's an eminent theologian at Fuller Seminary. And he came to visit my exhibit at the Catholic Cathedral in Los Angeles. And I was telling him, look at this is my procession, and the original's in the Vatican. He said, I know. We just saw it. Like he was matter of fact. I thought, I haven't seen it there, but it was for him, it was nonchalant there. But anyway. Anyway, that's a story. Any other questions? Throw me a question. Here's the young man in the side.
Talk about storytelling and what that means for an artist and the way that you're able to, in a picture, in such a compelling way, you tell a story.
Well, part of it is being dyslexic, and also being not being able to get like a complete thought. In a story, you have different segments, and if you just put it all in one panel, it would be hard to explain. How do you do it? Though in some paintings you see, like in the 1800s, 1700s, and 1500s, they would do everything happening in one picture. You'd see like all these different scenes. You'd see like a panorama of a village, like Jesus curing the blind man, and you'd see him being cured, then all the priests talking to him, and then Jesus talking to him. And, you'd see it all in one picture, so everything's simultaneous. But for me, I didn't think that way. I thought in a very logical way, and also because of comic books. That's how I learned to read, with comic books. And also movies. Movies were real important. That was because of Carita. Movies. She said, go to all the movies, look at every frame, don't wink your eyes, look at everything. Everything is important. Anyway, but the storytelling was why I was excited about art, because then you could make up your own stories. Oh, that's what had happened. I made up my own stories. When I started out, I started just making little pictographs, and there's one of a prisoner that I'll show you later, and it's 3 segments. And then I thought, well, I'll try another story, and I made up stories. Like I made one of a lady that's a cook, and then you see her going around buying all the produce and meat and everything, and then she goes and she's cooking, and then at a certain time she opens her little stall, like a little stall, and all these people and you see all the city in the background, and then all the people that are in all the windows, they all come to eat in the restaurant or the little stall. And see, I thought these are the saints, the ones that do. That's what Saint Teresa, the little flower, said: to do something as well as you can, even the ordinary, the simple task. Is that right? Am I quoting her right?
Well, you're not quoting it exactly, but that's what she said.
Yeah, but the ordinary things. And so this is a saint that she's faithful to doing this every day, and she does it as beautiful as she can.
The little stuff.
Say that.
The little stuff is
The little stuff. And then I did, because Daniel Ellsberg had done the Pentagon Papers, so I did the story of a man that works in a bomb factory, and I did it in little scenes. And then he put something in the bombs, so when they explode, when they're being sent to the villages, they explode in their peace bombs. Something like that. I mean, I was thinking of just ways to kind of look at our situation, and also I liked that children would like my work, and it was a way to appeal to children. But the more you do it, you keep thinking, all of a sudden it becomes part of how you're working. You want to see things in stories. But it took a long time. If you see my early work, it really took a long time. And as I said, I never planned to be doing artwork. I was just doing this because I hadn't been able to do anything else, and I failed. She said I failed. I didn't fail, but I didn't know where I was going. I was a pre-med student. Then I went to UCLA. I was going to be an economics major because I wanted to work in community organizing, and I failed economics. So bad, the teacher really called, and he said, you're failing, you've got an F. And I had tried very hard, but I was disappointed because I was getting close to 30, and I didn't know, what do I do now? And I thought, my life has ended. I don't fit into anything. I don't fit in. When I worked in the factory jobs, I didn't fit in, so in a way, and then all of a sudden, it didn't matter whether you fit in or you didn't, because this lady was teaching me how to do lettering, and then I learned how to do silk screen, and I was teaching myself, because if I watched other people, everything was backwards, because I'm dyslexic, and I'm left-handed, so whatever people are doing, they say, do it like this. Then I try to do it, and I was wrong. So anyway, that's the story. Any other questions? That's okay. I'll answer anything. Let's hold it for time. Oh, there's one in the back. That's Greg.
John, would you just expound a little more? I'm sitting next to Father Joe, who is a clown. He does clowns. And would you just expound on the gesture and the clowning
Well,
for
there's
us?
many clowns. You didn't see them. But I think, well, the very earliest times was when she said I was just a kid. And I didn't see my dad that many times, but he said, if you're good, you're going to the circus. So we would just jump all in the cab. It was in downtown
How old
LA.
were you then?
About 5 or 6.
And really made an
No,
impression?
maybe before, but then I remember that I was so excited by the clowns that I ran off with the clowns, and then my family had to come and try to bring me back because I thought they were so wonderful. But what I liked about it was when they all get in this car. Oh no, the car drives up, and then all these people are coming down.
Yeah.
But then you think of in St. Paul's epistles where he says you have to be fools for Christ, and then Francis was a fool, and then you look at the Russian the Russian saints. There's many that are fools, they consider themselves foolish, the foolish of God, and they do things, and then you look at all of history, and you look at all the jesters. Why did the kings have the jesters to tell them? And then you think of the earliest prehistoric people, they would be frightened by earthquakes and tornadoes and everything, and then the clowns would say, come on, let's get, don't be afraid. And maybe even the first priests were clowns in a way, because they had to try to get people rallied to get back to work and do their work, go on with their life and not be afraid. Those are ideas.
Thank you.
But I like the idea that that the clowns would be like God's angels. That we don't know what God's angels are like, and they would be just the opposite of what we think. They wouldn't be sanctimonious. They would be making you laugh and bringing you to another kind of look at life.
John, we need to wrap up, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, too.
But thanks a lot. You are all great, and I have.